Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to Trump Watch. The situation in Iran just gets more bizarre as each day goes by. As everyone knows, Trump has this ultimatum where he's saying that if the Iranian officials do not open up the Straits of Hormuz by 8 p.m. tonight, Tuesday, he's going to bomb the country to smithereens. He's going to bomb all the power plants and the bridges. And people are pointing out this is a war crime. He doesn't care. I mean, what difference does it make? The idea is that in war, you can't target the civilian population. And the argument is that by bombing these bridges and these power plants, you are essentially attacking the civilian population. Remember, Trump's already won the war. He himself has said that he won. He destroyed the military, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. They're totally decimated. They have total air superiority. And as I said in my last Trump Watch, why didn't he bring the troops home? Well, because the Iranians are not surrendering. You see, he could just come back. Okay, so gasoline prices are going up. So American farmers are getting destroyed because the cost of fertilizer is so high. The price of raspberries is soaring. But, I mean, this is just like sanctions. I mean, the U.S. government imposes sanctions on different nations, including Iran, has for decades, impoverishing people. Okay, these are a reverse form of sanctions. And what he's saying is, we got a right to put sanctions on other countries, but Iran doesn't have the right to put sanctions on us. Well, maybe, but I mean, it stands to reason that if people are not going to surrender, they might fight back. And the Pentagon told Trump that they might fight back here by doing this. And Trump just, said, no, it's not going to happen. It's sort of like China and all the debt they own of the U.S. government. People said, China could really cause some devastation by just dumping all their U.S. government bonds. And people have always said, no, that would hurt them too. Well, sometimes other things have priority over self-hurt financially. And people are willing to put up with a lot, lose a lot of money in order to wreak revenge or harm somebody else. In other words, sometimes there are other factors other than money. And so for the Iranians, they don't want to surrender. I mean, they're a proud people. It goes back to ancient Persia. They obviously will put up with a lot of death and suffering. They have put up with a lot of death and suffering at the hands of the Israeli government, which is just as ruthless as the U.S. empire is. And the Israeli government's already bombing civilian places like universities and pharmaceutical companies, but nobody's worried about a war crime here because who's gonna punish them for being war criminals or committing war crimes? The Congress? Don't make me laugh. It's Republican controlled. They're not about to impeach Trump, which they could, but I mean they're all scared to death of him. Well, except one or two, like Tom Massey's not scared of him. But look what happens to Massey. Trump targets him big time for being independent, recalcitrant. And every other congressman falls right into line. They're scared to death of Trump. So, the notion they're going to impeach Trump, they could have already done it, waging a war in violation of the Constitution. That's a high crime. The Constitution's clear. You don't wage war without a congressional declaration of war. Not gonna. He's our leader, Jacob. He's our leader. Or killing those people in the Caribbean. And it's just murder, just sheer murder. They don't have any authority to kill people for supposed drug law violations. You take them into custody. You bring them for trial under these ridiculous drug laws. But you don't see any impeachment effort there. That's a high crime. Murder's a high crime, at least a misdemeanor. And the Justice Department? I mean, that's the only other place where you could indict somebody for having committed a war crime. But Trump controls the Justice Department. So there's no possibility of that happening. And let's say some runaway grand jury returned indictments against Trump. They wouldn't get to first base because the Supreme Court will hold that Trump's immune from anything he does in office. And so is the national security establishment. long ago. Ever since the U.S. government was converted to a national security state, the Supreme Court made it clear that they would never interfere or enforce the Constitution against the national security state. And they even granted them favors like a state secrets doctrine. They gave them a state secrets doctrine. Ordinarily, in regular countries, the legislature, the parliament, the Congress has to decide whether to adopt a state secrets doctrine. Supreme Court says that's not necessary here. We'll just give it to them. and there's been that deference to the authority of the national security state ever since the conversion, but especially since the Kennedy assassination. I mean, everybody knows what went down there. At least everybody in Washington. Nobody dares speak it, but everybody knows this is the power of the federal government. I've been saying that for years. And so it's easy to blame Trump for this Trump's war on Iran along with the Israeli government, but I believe it's the national security establishment that's behind this thing. They have to keep things stirred up. They have to keep their budgets going. They have to keep their power going, and they do that with crises and chaos. And I said this before last summer, before the big Venezuela thing that they concocted. I mean, remember, there was no crisis in Venezuela. I mean, yeah, okay, people had been fleeing. There were immigrants coming because of the U.S. sanctions and their socialist system. But it was really a concocted crisis from the beginning, but everybody got all hyped up with it. And it was clearly because of the Epstein revolt within the MAGA movement. And this goes back to Roman times, that whenever there was a revolt among Roman citizens over out-of-control spending and taxes and inflation, I mean, same type of thing we're seeing here in this country with the U.S. empire, Roman emperors would start a foreign war, because then everybody starts talking about the war and rallying behind and saving the troops and supporting the troops. And, well, that was the whole idea behind Venezuela. Okay, the drug war and all this, narco-terrorism, socialism, communism, but it fizzled out rather quickly. And so it was clear that what they were trying to do is quell this revolt over Epstein, because that Epstein really makes the Israeli Mossad and the CIA very nervous. I'm convinced of this, because he had to be part of them. There's no other logical explanation for the sweetheart plea bargain he got. I mean, what other logical explanation? The U.S. attorney, who had said that he had heard that Epstein was part of intelligence, said, oh, well, no, I entered into this sweetheart plea bargain because I didn't want to risk an acquittal, so I got what I could get. Are you kidding me? They indicted and convicted his girlfriend, Epstein's girlfriend, gave her a 20-year jail sentence. But with pedophilia, you just go to trial. You take your chances. You don't give sweetheart deals to accused pedophiles, but they did here. This is the greatest sweetheart plea bargain in the history of criminal jurisprudence. I have no doubts about it. And there's only one logical explanation. He was working for intelligence, just what the U.S. attorney had heard. And that intelligence is the Mossad and the CIA, because they're joined at the hip. And so they both have an interest. Can you imagine if it openly came out that Epstein was working for the CIA and the Mossad? I mean, maybe that might be the catalyst finally for Americans to dismantle the whole national security state and restore a limited government republic, which was our founding governmental system. So they have to start these foreign wars, and so they start this thing with Iran because Venezuela kind of fizzled out. It didn't remove Epstein from the front page, but this one has. Notice now it's the ultimatum and saving the pilot and all this other stuff that, rally around the flag. Oh, I can't believe you're not supporting this war, Jacob. You're an American citizen. Well, this is Trump's war. This is the Pentagon's war. This is the CIA's war. Why do I need to support it? And now they're, it's kind of amusing to see Trump angry at those NATO countries for not coming to his assistance with the Strait of Hormuz, opening up the Strait of Hormuz, and he's threatening to withdraw the U.S. from NATO, which would be fantastic. I mean, this would be one of the greatest things to come out of this thing if the U.S. got out of NATO and NATO finally got dismantled. This is an old Cold War dinosaur. It was a central part of the Cold War racket. where the national security state was saying, oh, the Reds are coming, the Reds are coming. The same way they said with the Iranians, the Ayatollah's coming, Jacob, he's got WMDs, he's going to fire ballistic missiles. This is so ridiculous. There is no possibility whatsoever. I've been saying this for 36 years. No possibility that any foreign regime is going to invade, conquer, take on the United States. It's just not going to happen. Okay, notice that all these crises are over there. Okay, because no country's got the ability, the supply lines, the resources, the money, the troops, the transport ships to invade and conquer the United States. But this notion, they get Americans afraid. Americans are the most frightened people. It's just so. This is what I keep saying: the stronger your government, the weaker your nation. The more frightened your nation. Notice that we have the most powerful government in history, militarily, but the weakest people. Look how frightened Americans are. Americans are frightened of everything. Drug dealers, illegal alien invaders. Oh, Jacob, the invaders are coming to get us, those Venezuelans. Russia, China, Cuba, Iran, Iraq, they're all coming to get us, and everybody's just shivering and quivering and quaking. I mean, it's just tragic, but it's all part of the racket. See, that's the thing you got to keep in mind. This is all part of the racket. But because most Americans are educated public schools, they have these mindsets of molding their minds to whatever the officials are saying. So if the officials are saying, well, they're coming to get us. Oh, Jacob, they have access to information we don't have. They're coming to get us. I mean, you saw this during the build up to the Iraq War, which is another part of this racket. They said, oh, Saddam's coming to get us, Jacob. WMDs. They had charts, these beautiful little charts showing mushroom clouds over America and stuff. It's all part of the racket. And this notion that we're doing it for the Iranian people, Jacob. We love the Iranian people. This is such claptrap. But Americans buy into it. Oh, we're really helping them out. Jacob, they want us to bomb them. They're just, they like bombs. They like their houses destroyed. They like their society decimated. They want it, Jacob. Oh my gosh. It's the most incredible thing. They don't give a hoot about the Iranian people. They don't get. I mean, this is why when Trump's talking about the bombing the bridges and stuff, and they don't care about the consequences. They don't care about the war crimes aspect. Oh, I should have mentioned the International Criminal Court, but the U.S. refuses to join the International Criminal Court. So what's left to punish anybody for committing a war crime? Nothing's left. They can do whatever they want. And like I say, the Israeli government's already doing it, bombing universities, pharmaceuticals, and everything. And it's all with this notion of you open up these straits, the Strait of Hormuz, or else, the ultimatum. Now, I personally think Trump's not going to go down this road. I think he's bluffing. I think he's trying to get them to agree to a ceasefire. But why would you agree to a ceasefire? Just, to be bombed 6 months from now? What they want, and clearly they put it in this plan, is a permanent vow. Don't bomb us anymore, ever. And this is essentially what John Kennedy was faced with at the Cuban Missile Crisis, where he vowed, okay, we won't invade Cuba. And the Pentagon and the CIA were enraged that he had made that commitment. Okay, we're not going to bomb Cuba, and we're not going to invade anymore. And that settled the crisis. But Trump's not going to do that. He's not going to take on the deep state, despite what he said in his campaign. And I always said he was never going to take on the deep state. That was just campaign lingo to try to get libertarians on his side. But Kennedy took him on. I mean, Kennedy comes into office as a standard Cold Warrior, but at the Cuban Missile Crisis, he achieved a breakthrough. He started to achieve the breakthrough with the Bay of Pigs thing. That was where the CIA seduced him into approving this invasion of Cuba, a country that had never attacked the United States. I mean, in the long history of this sordid relationship between Cuba and the United States, it's always been the U.S. that's been the aggressor. That's what a lot of Americans don't realize. They are the aggressors, the U.S. empire. invasions, assassinations, assassination attempts, acts of terrorism inside, deadly acts of terrorism inside Cuba. And Cubans always said, just leave us alone. It's not like Cuba was coming to get us. But it's always national security, Jacob, national security, because national security is part of this racket. That's the two most important words in the American political lexicon, national security. I mean, you go into a federal courtroom and all the Justice Department lawyer has to say is, Your Honor, this case deals with national security. And man, the judge gets so nervous. Oh, national security. He slams the gavel and says, case dismissed. And he goes back in his chambers and has a drink because he's so nervous over national security, national security. It's ridiculous. It's the most meaningless, nebulous term, but it justifies, or it's used to justify, whatever they want to do, whether it's assassinations, invasions, coups, wars of aggression, whatever. National security, and that's the end of the story, national security. It's all just part of the racket. And so Kennedy's broke through, and he realized the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a racket. This whole Cold War was a racket. The national security establishment was doing gangbusters. But, you had the Korean War and the Vietnam War where they sacrificed 58,000 of my generation for nothing. I think it was around 50,000 in the Korean War. And then all the coups and then all the destruction of liberty and privacy here at home to keep us safe from the Reds. Because remember, the Reds were coming to get us, Jacob, and, they destroyed all those people who had been members of the Communist Party. Well, in a free society, you got a right to join whatever party you want, communist, socialist, whatever. And in fact, I still find it so friggin' ironic that they're partnering with this communist socialist regime in Venezuela. I mean, it's the weirdest arrangement you've ever seen here. This is a narco-terrorist regime, centrally managed and planned, and the U.S. government's partnering with them, where the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, is essentially like a vassal in the Middle Ages, where the lord of the manor tells the vassal, this is what you're going to do, and then the vassal tells all the peons what they're going to do, and that's the way this thing's being run. But they're communists. So it's a centrally managed system. And everybody treats this as normal. But they forget the Cold War racket and the blockade against Cuba because, Jacob, Cuba has a socialist system. Yeah, that's what they've chosen, just like Americans have chosen Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and Amtrak and the Federal Reserve and interstate highway system and other socialist projects. Okay, that's their system. But no, it's terrible, Jacob. It's terrible. Their socialist system is terrible. It's causing all this starvation. No, it's causing the starvation in conjunction with the American blockade. That's what the proponents of interventionism always block out of their minds because they don't want to criticize the empire. The empire is like their god. Okay, the Pentagon, the CIA, I mean, they bow to the empire, and they don't want to criticize the empire. But it's like a vice that's now killing the Cuban people. But they're over there partnering with this socialist, communist, centrally planned regime, a narco-terrorist regime. And everybody treats it as normal. Oh, this is all normal, Jacob. La, la, la. It's just like 1984 Orwell. I mean, you walk around, you see all this bizarre stuff. And now they're raising the notion in Iran of a religious war. Okay, so Trump has given out 10 excuses for invading and then declared victory. And said that he would never accept anything less than the unconditional surrender, sort of like Franklin Roosevelt, But now they're raising the specter of a religious war, which is absolutely fascinating. I mean, one of the most bizarre things in this whole thing was the Easter Day announcement by Trump. I forget whether he put it on Twitter, X, or whether it was on his True Social website, but this is really, really weird. So he uses the F word. He's talking to the Iranian leaders and he's saying, if you don't lift this Strait of Hormuz control there, blockade, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to bomb you to smithereens. I'm going to send you back to the Stone Age. And then he calls them bastards. I mean, this is weird stuff. I mean, imagine a 12, 13-year-old is keeping up with the news and is going to go give a report to his social studies class in his school about current events, and he's reading this profanity from a U.S. president. I mean, it's clear. And the Iranians came back and said, something to the thinks that it looks like this man's losing it. Now, Trump may not be losing it, but one could understand why someone would think that he was losing it. And then he's got this praise be to Allah on Easter. I mean, this is really weird. Why would he say that? Well, it seems to me that one explanation is he's mocking Islam. He's mocking the Islamic religion. Well, but, they've always tried to be careful ever since the 9/11 attacks not to overtly say that this is a religious war between Christianity and Islam, which is kind of weird because they've partnered with a Jewish regime there in Israel, which obviously is not Christian, not Muslim, but it's also not Christian. But in any event, they're conjuring up this thing, and this is what we heard after the 9/11 attacks, if y'all recall. Oh, Sharia law, Jacob, this is about Islam, the caliphate. They want to establish a caliphate. They've been going back centuries, and you had regular people going and studying, Wikipedia about the history of Islam and the Muslims and the Crusades, and saying, they're coming, Jacob, they're coming. Well, it had nothing to do with religion. I mean, you had Muslims here. I've got a neighbor who's a Muslim. He's a great guy, really nice guy. He's got a family and all. But it had nothing to do with religion. It was a blowback for U.S. foreign policy. Okay, remember what the U.S. was doing in Iraq, Iran, NQ. But it was the same principle. Saddam Hussein's coming to get us. This was, after the Cold War fizzled out. And they needed a new official enemy to justify the continuation of the national security state. And so Saddam Hussein took the place of the Reds and to a certain extent the Muslims. But Saddam was coming to get us. For 11 years, we had to hear this pounded into our heads. Saddam, 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 every day. Saddam, Saddam. And the WMDs. And so finally, they said, the sanctions, they had sanctions against Iraq, just like they have had sanctions against Iran for decades, targeting the civilian population. So this notion of, oh, Jacob, we care so much about the Iranian people. This is all about them. We want to free them. We want to put in a U.S.-controlled dictator like the Shah, Jacob. He was so nice. He was so benevolent. Really? Then why did they revolt against him in 1979 if he was so nice and benevolent with his CIA-trained Savak? So it's never about the love of the Iranian people because they brutalized them with these sanctions, impoverish them, and that's what they were doing with the Iraqi people. Same thing. And remember, this was Saddam Hussein had been a partner of the U.S. empire beforehand. When he was waging war against Iran, they were supporting him. In fact, one of the dark secrets is that they were furnishing Saddam Hussein with WMDs, like poisonous gas, to use against the Iranian people. Okay, Iranian troops in that war. I don't know how long the war lasted, 8-9 years, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Iranians lost their lives because the U.S. was supporting Saddam. Well, then they needed a new official enemy. And after 9/11, terrorism replaced communism is the big boogeyman, along with, drug lords and illegal alien invaders and all that stuff that scares the dickens out of the American people. So Saddam's coming. And so after the 9/11 attacks, they decide to invade Iraq. 11 years of sanctions had not produced a regime change. But it was always a war against the populace with these sanctions. 3 high UN officials resigned from the United Nations because of what they called genocide that was killing Iraqi children with the sanctions. Because when you hear Trump talking about destroying, bombing the power plants and the bridges and the infrastructure, I think back to what the Pentagon did in the prelude to the war against Iraq. They bombed the water and sewage treatment plants on purpose with the intent of creating infectious illnesses among the Iraqi people. The idea being that if people are dying from the infectious illnesses, they'll oust Saddam and we get regime change on the cheap. Well, the cheap insofar as the U.S. is concerned, not with respect to the Iraqis who would be dying from that. But then when the sanctions come in, because they didn't go in there and oust Saddam Hussein in the first Iraq war, they left him in power. So they said, well, we'll now have the sanctions that will prevent the water and sewage treatment plants from being repaired. And so over the next 11 years, they couldn't repair them because of the sanctions. And so people were dying in mass from illness and infection. And everybody was treating it as normal here in the United States. Mainstream press, normal. Madeleine Albright, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, she's asked by 60 Minutes whether the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children are worth regime change or the effort to give regime change. She says, oh, yeah, of course. It's a tough issue, but yeah. Children, they didn't care. Nobody criticized her, condemned her in the government or the mainstream press. There was one guy, Jeffrey Sachs, this guy was heroic, private citizen, was going to Iraq with medicines, trying to alleviate the suffering and other essentials, and the U.S. went after him with a vengeance. They fined him, they pursued him like this obsessive thing that they were obsessed with with Sachs, and Bert Sachs was his name, and they went after him. He ultimately won. He didn't have to pay their $10,000 fine or something like that. But my point is that they don't give a hoot about the Iranian people, and so now they bring up this religious war thing, and Trump with his Easter Day message, praise be to Allah. And what he's trying to do is give another, like an 11th excuse for people. And some people are already grabbing onto it. They're going back to the caliphate and the Sharia law, and this is a religious war between Christianity and Islam, except the Jewish state is over there involved in it too. And this is so ridiculous, just so ridiculous. It has nothing to do with religion, okay? I mean, you got Hegseth with all his tattoos. It's kind of interesting that they go after Venezuelan refugees who have tattoos, but there's Hegseth with his, tattoos talking about this is God's war and this is a religious war and Christians should pray for victory. And wow, I mean, this is bizarre stuff. This is really bizarre stuff. But they're giving Americans another excuse as to why they should support this really evil war. It's like what I say in my series, The Evil Within. It's a classic, perfect example of how evil within the U.S. government is using Christianity as a way to advance evil. And I don't have any part of it. I mean, okay, I'm paying higher prices at the gas tank because of what's happened here and higher prices for raspberries and so forth, but they're just kind of reverse sanctions. That's the way I look at it. The U.S. government imposes sanctions on people around the world. The Iranians are imposing sanctions on the U.S. That's what this Strait of Hormuz thing is. It's a sanction, and the Iranians are saying, no, to lift this thing, a ceasefire is not going to work because you'll just come and bomb us 6 months from now. They're tired of being bombed periodically. They want a permanent peace. They want lifting of the sanctions, and I'd like to see a permanent peace too. I'd like to see a dismantling of the national security state, a dismantling of foreign interventionism, a dismantling of this whole thing. I mean, have you ever wondered why they hate China so bad? Because while they're over there weakening our nation with their 20-year war in Afghanistan, their 16-year war in Vietnam, their 8 or 12-year war in Iraq, their interventionism here and their interventionism now and this thing, China just sits back. Now, China's still a communist, centrally planned regime, just like Venezuela, which the U.S. government is partnering with now. But they've liberalized their economy where they get stronger because they just sit back and watch all these foreign things. They see our debt going up $39 trillion. They see Trump now calling for a $1.5 trillion budget for the Pentagon. We don't know what it is for the CIA. That has to be secret. But that's why they hate China, because China just sits back and watches our nation get weaker and weaker because of the warfare state, as well as the welfare state. And they're doing more and more. I mean, the debt's soaring. In other words, the empire is going to be cratering from within. That they're destroying us from within because of these evil systems that I talk about in my series that have attached themselves onto the federal government and that are using good as a way to advance evil. And then you see this in Venezuela. This is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. This is a socialist communist regime. That's why they're supposedly blaming all the economic woes in Cuba on socialism and communism. Well, no, it's the blockade, along with the socialism and communism, that is threatening the Cuban people now. You think they care about the Cuban people? They're living in devastation, on the verge of starvation. They don't care. They just want regime change. Okay, and then Venezuela, they're partnering with a socialist communist regime. That's what the whole Cold War racket was about. This is what Kennedy realized was a racket. This is why they took him out. A president that realizes it's a racket and says we're going to bring an end to the racket. And that was after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Kennedy vowed that the U.S. would not invade Cuba, bomb Cuba anymore. This is what Iran wants. Iran wants the same deal that Kennedy gave Cuba. You vow not to bomb us or invade us anymore. Well, Trump's not going to make that vow. Okay, neither is the Pentagon, the CIA, but Kennedy made the vow. He went around their backs at his talk in American University, his deal with the Soviets over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Says we're going to move America in a new direction. No more Pax Americana and all this, and they took him out because he was a threat to the whole racket. And a lot of people thought Trump was going to do the same thing. He talked about draining the swamp and battling the deep state. You hear that now? No, because he's been absorbed by it all. And it's what I've been saying, that great book, National Security and Double Government, that I keep recommending to people. It's the national security state that's in charge here. And now Trump is right on board. He's, up there, but it's really the national security establishment that's calling the shots here. They need chaos. They need crises. They need official enemies. And they're weakening our nation in the process. They're destroying our nation. They've destroyed our liberty. That's the other thing about these foreign wars. Notice that there's very little talk about our freedom here at home. Not just economic freedom in terms of all the taxes and the out-of-control spending and debt that destroyed the Roman Empire from the inside, but all the Patriot Act, the surveillance, the TSA crud, and it's all Homeland Security. It's like I think of Starship Troopers when I think of Homeland Security, this military nation. This is where the soul searching has to take place in this country. Of where we started as a nation. How did we get here? Is this something good? Is this something that Christians should be exalting and praying for? And this is so totally bizarre. And this is where Americans need to do some soul searching and not settle for what we have here. We don't have to settle for what we have. We can build on the good principles that characterize this nation, that once characterized this nation, and that were abandoned, both on the domestic side, the drug war, the welfare state, but also on the foreign affairs side, the national security establishment, the foreign empire of military bases, the military-industrial complex, the deep state, what Trump used to decry on the campaign trail. If we do that, then we got a shot at getting this country back on the right track, and that's what we need to do. This is Trump Watch. Thank you all for tuning in, and as always, thank you for your great support of FFL.